Brother Gary and Linda's grandson that comes. If you see us messing around with an iPad or a phone up on the platform, I promise you we're not playing games or anything. Our sound system's all controlled through our phones and our tablets, and we're still working on everything. So if you see me playing around or something, I promise I'm not bored with the service and trying to do something else. Just trying to get all these whatever wrinkles figured out. I do have a note here from Brother Curtis Hall from Best Missions. He says, Pastor Short, New Testament Baptist, Missionary Baptist, thank you. So I should have read this before I started reading it out loud because he wrote in cursive. Brother Hall, if you're watching this, your handwriting is awful, and that's me being nice. Thank you so much for having Amber and I in for your missions conference. We enjoyed our time with you and are thankful for your interest in Best Missions. We will be praying for you, your commitments. Thank you for, I don't know what that is, but he says thank you for something. We did something good. I don't know what it is, but he said thank you for being a blessing to us. Goodness. All right, your servant in Christ, Curtis and Amber Hall. I'll put this back there if you would like to try to decipher it for yourself. And I was with Brother Hall last week again. I was with him Monday and Tuesday in Evansville, Indiana. And they had their Best Missions, their missions organization had a conference. And Brother John Wilkerson from First Baptist Hammond and Brother Steve Frost from Shawnee Baptist in Louisville preached and did a tremendous job. And tell you, this last month has challenged me more for doing more for Christ than maybe any month in my entire life. I'm just going to be honest with you, and realizing that we have no excuse not to do anything. We have been given too much, whether it be ability, whether it be technology, whether it be money. We have been given too much to do this little for God. And I think it's time we step up. And you say, you're just trying to get our money. I said before, the money I'm trying to raise is all going out towards missions. So if I'm a money-hungry preacher, I'm a horrible one, because I'm trying to raise no money for myself. It's all going to come in and go right back out. And so in that, I do apologize. Our print stuff has all been messed up, and I wanted to have our missions cards with any type of commitment card for your personal or to give back to the church for the general fund. And it's been a mess, but we will get all that taken care of, and so hopefully Wednesday. But anyways, all right, Deuteronomy chapter number 5. We're starting out good because I can tell you my notes are already out of place, out of order. So when you look down and notice that page 1 is not page 1, and now I don't know where page 1 has disappeared to. All right. Let's see if this is it. I don't know. We'll figure it out. All right. Goodness. You ever have days where you just feel like Satan's just fighting, or just something's fighting, and it's been a week like that. It's just, I'm telling you, since before the missions conference, I feel like everything has just been a fight. I don't say that whining, I'm just being transparent for a couple minutes. I just feel like everything has been a fight. And some of it may be my own fault, and that's fine too. So, all right, let's see here. Deuteronomy chapter number 5. I'm going to see if I can just pull this up on my phone. If not, this might be the shortest message or the longest, because I may just go rogue here in a second, so you never know what's going to happen. Goodness, come on. They do technology to make life easier, and all it does is complicate things. Deuteronomy chapter number 5. Deuteronomy is the 5th book of the Bible. We'll be starting a new series next Sunday morning. I invite you to that. We're going to be starting a series in the book of Jonah. And we're going to be going really kind of verse by verse through Jonah. And so I don't know how long it'll take for us to get through it, but I don't care. It's going to be a good series. And so now I will say the first sermon is one of the first sermons I ever preached here. Not as your pastor, but whenever I was candidating, I preached the first sermon. But I prayed about it and said, well, a couple things. One, it's been over a year, and I forget what happened last week. Two, there's a lot more faces here now than there were whenever I candidated. And so there's a lot of you. I would say, I counted just a little bit ago, and I think we have 34, 35 here. There's more people here who weren't here when I candidated. And so for those that were, act like you haven't heard it before. You don't get a get out of church free card. But those who haven't, I hope you enjoy. But we'll be in Jonah starting next Sunday morning. But we're going to stop for a second as we honor our mothers this morning. Deuteronomy contains what we could call the farewell messages from Moses. He was preaching his last words to a generation that will cross over and enter into the promised land of Canaan. Moses wants to help the new generation avoid some of the mistakes of their parents and grandparents. So Moses tells them how to get along in this new land that they are inheriting. And one of the things Moses does is to review some of the helpful laws that God had given the people. Specifically in Deuteronomy chapter 5, Moses reviews the Ten Commandments. And you say, you've already preached through the Ten Commandments. I have. I preached through the Ten Commandments out of Exodus. Now we're into Deuteronomy. See, I get to preach them all again because they're in a whole other book of the Bible. No, it's the same commandments. It's the same commandments, but he's just reviewing them. But we're going to look at one of those this morning. If you could, let's stand. We're only going to read one verse here. One verse. Deuteronomy chapter number 5 and verse number 16. Honor thy father and thy mother, as the Lord God hath commanded thee, that thy days may be prolonged, that it may go well with thee in the land which the Lord thy God hath giveth thee. Goodness. Let's say that together. Let's read that together. Honor thy father and thy mother, as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee, that thy days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Father, thank you again for all that you've done. I pray you'll meet with us for the next few moments as we just take a look at your word. I pray you'll just speak to us. In Jesus' name, amen. You can be seated. I read about a young preacher who was preparing to preach his first sermon. Because it was his very first sermon, he wanted to do a really good job, and so he wanted the perfect introduction, one that really grabs people's attention. So he went to an older pastor and asked if he had a sermon introduction that would really get the people's attention. The older pastor smiled and said, "Son, I've got an introduction that works every single time." He goes, "I've used it for years. It's guaranteed to work. Here's what you do. You get to the pulpit and you make this statement. Some of the greatest days of my life were spent in the arms of another man's wife," he said. Then I pause for a moment. Then I say, "My mother." For the pastor said that introduction will definitely get their attention. Then he said, "Now remember, don't forget to pause for a moment. And whatever you do, don't forget to say, 'My mother.'" Well, the Sunday came. The young man was standing to preach his first sermon. He was nervous. He was scared. He gets up there. He had forgotten to tell his wife what he was going to do in his opening and his introduction. So he walked up to the pulpit, nervously cleared his voice. Says, "Some of the greatest days of my life were spent in the arms of another man's wife." Then he paused for a moment. But as he was pausing, he saw his wife, who was a rather large and hot-tempered woman, and angrily getting up out of her seat and stomping down the aisle, making her way to the pulpit. So he said again, "Some of the greatest days of my life were spent in the arms of another man's wife." He paused again, but this time his wife was marching up on the platform, and he quickly said again, "Some of the greatest days of my life were spent in the arms of another man's wife, and for the life of me, I can't remember who that woman was." This morning, we're going to take some time to remember our mothers. Hi, Valerie. We're going to look at Deuteronomy 5, verse 16. There's two truths that we're going to look at this morning, and I'm not going to be long. I just want to do I just want to follow God this morning. It says this: honor thy father and thy mother, as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee, that thy days may be prolonged, and may go well with thee in the land which thy God hath giveth thee. Here's the first truth. And by the way, I want to say this: we're focusing in on mothers, but if you're a kid here today, say, wait a second, we just sent all of our kids to the children's church. Listen, I don't care how old you are, you're still a kid to somebody. And even if your parents are gone, there are aunts and uncles, there are other family members who look at you and you're a kid to them. So even though we're focusing in on the mothers, while we're preaching here, God signaled out the fathers as well. I thought about just combining and saying this is a Mother's and Father's Day message all in one, but I didn't want to do a disservice to the mothers, and we're focusing on the mothers. But dads, this is for you, or kids. I know we have some people here whose parents are still alive. This is for you. Also, this is a challenge to you, both mothers and fathers, on how to live. Because if you're a mother and you're a father, you have kids who are looking up to you. And I'm just going to give you your part real quick. It says, honor thy father and thy mother. So here's your challenge real quick. I'll hit it in a second. Hey, moms, dads, live a life worth honoring. Live a life worth honoring. You've heard, I've talked about some of the stuff with my dad, and my dad wasn't always the greatest. And listen, that's not easy to say. And I'm just going to be honest with you, it's not easy to say knowing that my grandma's probably going to watch us at some point. It's not easy for me to talk about my dad, her son, and say, my dad wasn't always the greatest dad. But that doesn't matter. So let me hop in here. I'm going to jump ahead. So there's two truths that we see. Here's the first truth. Honoring mom is required by our God. It says, honor thy father and thy mother. It could hardly be any clearer. God says to honor them. While both parents are in view here, I'm going to focus specifically on the mother. So honoring mom is required by God. It's not an option. When we talk about honor, the word means this: to esteem or to recognize the value of. When you go to Walmart or Best Buy or someplace like that, and you bring your item to the counter, and maybe you pull out a gift card. How many of you have ever bought something with a gift card? You pull out a gift card and you hand it to the cashier. The cashier grabs that gift card, not a bank card, not a debit card, not a credit card, not cash. Understand what I'm saying here. But she grabs that gift card and she sees it and she rings it up and deducts the money off of it. Why? Does that card in and of itself have any value? It's plastic. But as the gift card, the cashier sees that and sees that there's an intrinsic value to that gift card. There's something about that gift card that makes that gift card different. What is it? Well, that gift card someone took and paid money for and put money on it, loaded it with some money so someone could spend it. But it has value. The cashier understood the value. So what did she do? She honored the gift card. Why are we talking about gift cards? We're talking about mothers. Now understand what I'm saying here. She didn't look at it and say, this isn't a debit card, I'm not taking it. This isn't a credit card, this isn't cash, I'm not taking it. She knew there was a value, an intrinsic value, and she honored it. God says our moms have intrinsic value. An inherent value that we are to recognize. So the fifth commandment begins by instructing us to recognize the value of our moms. For most of us, this commandment is relatively easy to carry out. We're grateful for our mothers. We thank God for our mothers. We have little difficulty recognizing the value of our mothers. Some of us may struggle a bit. We may not feel our moms are worthy of honor. that we're commanded to bestow. Some say, well, you don't know my mother. Or good thing you never knew my mom. Can I share a statement I read this week? Only perfect children have a right to demand perfect parents. I'll quote that again. Only perfect children have a right to demand perfect parents. So see, if you're a Christian, you can be grateful your mom, no matter how many mistakes she made. Commandment doesn't say to only honor your mother if she's perfect. It just simply says to honor your mother. There's no qualifications here. It just says honor. This is an area where it really got to me. I had to dissect this. And again, I know this is Mother's Day, but I'm going to use my dad as an example if you allow me to. But I remember in dealing with my dad walked out on us when I was 10 years old. At 12 years old, I got a letter saying he never wanted to see us again. I had no contact with my dad. I did not see my dad. I did not talk to my dad. I had zero contact with my dad from the age of 12 to 19. At 19, I finally talked to my dad. Didn't see my dad until I was over 20. 8 years I went without seeing my dad. 9 years, am I doing the math right there? 7 years without talking to him. Here's what got me. And by the way, I wasn't even in church at the time. This wasn't me sitting in a sermon and God in the church and God dealing with me. This was me being out of church and God calling to memory things that I had heard in church. Foreshadow there, we're going to get to that. And I remember the Ten Commandments. I remember this commandment of honor thy father and thy mother. Period. Honor thy father and mother, not when they're good to you, not when they bless you, not when they help you, not when they give you things, not when they do things for you, not when they take care of all your needs, not when you like it, not when they've been nice to you, not when they've been fair to you, not whenever they've given their whole life for you. It just says honor your mother and father. Period. And I looked and said, my dad walked out on me. My dad said he hated me. It was in a letter. My dad said he never wanted to see me again. My dad didn't make effort to see me for 7, 8 years. He's done nothing worth honoring. And God said, Lee, that's not what I said to you. I didn't ask you, Lee, is your dad worth honoring? I said, Lee, honor your dad. And that day I decided, even if it was a one-sided relationship, and by the way, there were times where it was completely one-sided. If it was a one-sided relationship, if I made all the phone calls, if I made all the effort, if I made all the trips, if I made all the visits, if I did everything and he did nothing, I was still going to honor my dad. And it was better to have a one-sided relationship with my dad than no relationship at all. By the way, me and my dad got to repair our relationship. Me and my dad, the last 2 things my dad and I got to do together, we got to go fishing and he went to church with me. So guess what? I got to, in honoring my dad, God restored me and my dad's relationship. I got my dad back again. I got to enjoy my dad. And one day I'll get to see him again. But the honoring doesn't stop. Understand, you'll never hear me badmouth my dad. I'll be honest. But I'm not going to badmouth him. You'll never hear me badmouth my mom. I have a great mom. I love my mom. My mom prayed for me. Does my mom do some things that get on my nerves? Sure. Absolutely. Do I agree with my mom on 100% of things 100% of the time? No. But the Bible says this: honor your mother and your father. Period. By the way, it doesn't say honor them until they die, and then you can say and do whatever you want. It doesn't say that. So your parents being passed doesn't now give you the right. Now understand what I'm saying, and I'm going to tread very carefully here, knowing that Ms. Pearl has shared a lot of her testimony. That you can be honest. You can be honest about who your parents are without being disrespectful. By the way, I've heard Ms. Pearl's testimony, and there's some rough parts to it. But even in that, and even in her being honest about who some of the people in her life have been, I've never heard her in a disrespectful way badmouth her mom or her dad. I'm not holding Miss Pearl up. I just know this is an example I can give. Here's what I'm saying. Whether your parents are sitting in a pew next to you, in a house across the city, a house across the state or the country, or whether they have gone on before you, whether your parents have passed away or are now in heaven and hopefully one day you'll see them again, or sadly for some of us, maybe our parents passed away not knowing the Lord and they're eternally separated from God, the command on you is still this: honor your mother and your father, period. Honor your mother. How do we do that? It's simple, really. Here's what I've learned, and I'm bad about it, and I call my mom and apologize. Me and my mom, we butt heads. I'm just going to be honest with you. Our personalities, we butt heads. And there are times where I have to call my mom and apologize because I can come across rude or I can get frustrated. And in my frustration, I may say something not necessarily the way I want to. And listen, my mom has been with me through my struggles. My mom stood by me in my struggles with addiction, and there was some ugliness in there. My mom stood by in struggles whenever I struggled with alcohol, and there was some ugliness there. But my mom's always stood by me, and even when we've butted heads, the commandment is this: to honor my mother. Here's the problem. Addison and Micah, especially Micah knows everything. Micah will argue with you about everything. There are times where I'm convinced that I could look at him and say, the color of this mic stand is black, and Micah would say, well, actually, it's a mixture of black and gray, but it has a little more of a gray hint to it. I mean, just to argue. And I look at him and go, Bub, if you grow up to be half as smart as you think you are, you will rule the world, buddy. But you know what? I laugh and I see head shaking because a lot of you are going, my kid was the same way. How many of you had a kid that knew it all, had all the answers? But if I was to ask you now, do you think you have all the answers? You, not your kid, you. You'd be slow to raise your hand. But yet, we still have that attitude with our parents. Our parents are never smart enough. Our parents never know enough. Our parents have never experienced enough. And though I look at Micah and get so frustrated with him going, Micah, you don't know everything. Just quit arguing. Quit questioning, just stop. But as much as I do that with Micah, I realize in talking to my own mom, I do the same thing to her. The difference is this: I'm older now. I should know better. But yet I don't. And there are times where my mom will call and yes, why do you always sound so frustrated when you answer the phone when I call? And I'm going to let the cat out of the bag because I know she's going to watch. And sometimes the answer is this: I just don't know if I've done anything to get in trouble or not. I'm 38, but I'm still scared of Mom. I'm still worried that I'm about to get lectured about something. Hold on. We're going to cut the mic for a second. She can't hear. Mom, I talked about how much you love me. Here's what I'm saying. I'm to honor her just as much now as I was when I was 6, 7, or 8. Guess what? My mom doesn't know as much when it comes to technology, when it comes to trying to figure out iPhones and iPads and TVs and streaming, all this stuff. And there are times I get calls a lot. How do I do this? How do I do what? I'm trying to watch something. I'm trying to fix something. Well, okay. So what do I do? It's like, Mom, I don't even know what you're looking at. I don't know. I don't see what you're seeing. It's not right for me, even in those moments, to get frustrated and mad at her. She's my mom. She wiped my behind. The most I can do is help her get on her iPhone. But yet we get so frustrated with our parents. And by the way, can I go ahead and expand this a little bit? Because I can see maybe some of you are going, my parents are gone, so this message doesn't qualify to me. You have aunts, you have uncles, you have grandparents maybe. If nothing else, you have a wife, you have a boss at work. There's authority in your life. And this would be good for you to apply to all authority in your life, not just your parents. But there are parent figures in everybody's life. I don't care how old you are. The command is this: to honor them. Period. Everything I do, I should do in honor for them. No, understand, that means when I'm frustrated with them, I need to be careful of my attitude. I need to be careful of my tone and my speech. We used to have a generation that grew up washing kids' mouths out with soap. Now we have a generation that regularly cusses out their parents. And by the way, it used to be, if this ever happened, it could shut down a store. Brother Gary, when you were growing up, if somebody saw some kid cussing out their parents, other people would intervene. Today, everyone turns a blind eye. But you find out somebody washed out their kid's mouth with soap, and CPS is going to get called. The world's completely changed. But here's the command: honor your mother. But you don't know my mom. I don't have to know your mom. She's your mom. Honor her. But you don't know I don't care what they've done. Honor them. But they've made my life. I don't care how horrible or how rough they've made your life. Honor them. Fine, your parents are horrible. Then thank God He gave you horrible parents, because now you know what not to be. And now you can be the perfect parent you wanted your mom and dad to be. Oh, by the way, let me ask your kids how perfect you are. And some of us will get on the phone or face to face or with our actions be disrespectful and blow off our parents, and then in the next breath look at our kids and say, why don't you treat me with respect? Why don't you love me? Mom, I ain't got time for you. Why don't you ever come and visit? Maybe. Maybe it's because you don't honor your own mom, that your kids don't honor you. Second part to this promise is this. I don't have my Bible on me, so this is the LEE version. This is, your day may be long, but then it says this, and it may go well with thee. I know that's not exactly how it's written, but you can read it. You'll see what I'm saying. What does that mean? The promise is this: you honor your parents, and God will take care of you. That's what it says. That's what it says. Did you ever think about this? Maybe some of the problems and the pains in your life are because God hasn't gone well with thee, because you haven't been honoring your mother and your father. And God's just kind of taken his hands off and said, why do I need? I'm done. Let me read it exactly right. Second verse. That thy days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with thee. So honoring our mom results in our good. Paul says this in the first of the Ten Commandments with the promise. If we'll honor our moms, it'll go well with us. That's the idea here. Specifically to the nation of Israel, it would go well with them in the land which was promised them. By way of applications, when we honor our mom, it goes well with us. And it does. When we honor our mom, recognizing her inherent worth, recognizing her intrinsic value, it goes well with us. We have a better quality of life when we honor our moms and dads. How many of you would be honest and say, maybe you would even say, can I get a bottle of water, Brother Abe? Thank you. Maybe you would even say, you know what, I have a pretty good life, but my quality of life could be better. Some of you say, my life is horrible. But how many of you would be honest and say that my quality of life could improve? Mine could. Absolutely. So it says we can have a better quality of life when we honor our mother. Why? For the same reason, things go better for us when we obey all the commands of God. When we obey God, He honors our obedience. That is why when I'm counseling folks and the Bible speaks clearly to a particular issue, such as forgiveness, or tithing, or faithfulness in marriage, or loving one another, bearing one another's burdens, I'll say that's what God says in His words. If you'll do it, He will honor your commitment. I've dealt with strife amongst people, and I've dealt with there being issues amongst the brethren and people having problems and being offended. And I've dealt with that. I've dealt with it a lot, so much so that some people are tired of me dealing with it. But one of the things that maybe I haven't done a good job of explaining, and that is this, is even when you don't think you've done anything wrong, even when you think that the other party is entirely wrong and you've done nothing, one of the reasons I encourage you just to go and apologize and make things right is the Bible's clear about forgiveness and strife with the brethren. And He puts it on both sides to make things right and both sides to apologize. And that's one of the reasons why I tell you, make things right. Why? Because even if you feel you didn't do things wrong, make things right, because God blesses. Did you drink out of this one? I'm just picking on you. Because God blesses obedience. Don't worry. When this thing is gone, I'll be done preaching. I'm just kidding. That is a large bottle of water. I had a preacher once. I went to completely getting distracted for a second. I went one time, and they had just normal bottles of water. And the preacher joked around about how he knew he was done preaching when his water was empty. And we got up to preach the next night. They had the little mini bottles of water up on the pulpit. Oh, sorry. Okay, I got distracted. When we obey God, He honors our obedience. That's the idea. Do what God says, and He will honor your obedience. Honoring mom is required by our God, and honoring mom results in our good because God blesses obedience. I came across these lessons in my studying. It was entitled, Lessons My Mom Taught Me. Here are just a few. My mother taught me logic because I said so, that's why. My mother taught me foresight. Make sure you wear clean underwear in case you get in an accident. My mother taught me about time travel. If you don't straighten up, I'm going to knock you into the middle of next week. My mother taught me irony. Keep laughing, I'll give you something to laugh about. My mother taught me contortionism. We look at the dirt on the back of your neck. My mother taught me to appreciate a job well done. You're going to kill each other, do it outside. I just finished cleaning. My mom taught me about religion. You better pray that will come out of the carpet. When it comes to honoring our mothers, you know who the best example in the Bible is? Jesus. We see it in two ways. First, in Luke chapter 2, you don't have to turn there. Just 12 years old, somehow Jesus gets left behind in Jerusalem, separated from his mom and dad. They go back and they find him in the temple talking and teaching with scholars. They say, we've been looking for you. And he tells them that he's been about his father's business. But then if you read the very next verse, it says this, that he left and was in submission or submissive to them. Okay, you think, okay, it's a kid following his parents. No, think about this. This was Jesus. This was God in flesh who chose. I would love to, maybe we'll do a sermon or something on this sometime, but realizing, do you think about this, even in birth, as a toddler, as a child, and a teenager, a young adult, Jesus was 100% God still. He chose to set aside some of his godly attributes and deity attributes. But he was still 100% God. He could do and say anything. He was the authority. But yet, he understood in his flesh, because he was 100% man, that he was a child, that was his mother and his father. So even God, in the form of a child in Christ, was submissive to his mom and dad. If anybody could ever say, I'm a perfect kid, I expect perfect parents, you're not perfect, I don't have to listen to you, it would be Jesus. First of all, we know Jesus wouldn't have that kind of attitude. But second, he lays out an illustration of showing, here is honor. I submit to my mother and to my father. At 12, being God. But then we look ahead to the cross. And he doesn't say a lot on the cross. Just a handful of sayings. But you know what one of those were? James, take care of mom. Wasn't blank you, mother. It was take care of mom. It wasn't I had the worst mom in the world, I don't have to listen to her. It was make sure my mom's okay. It wasn't I'm 33, I'm an adult. It was I'm concerned about her. I know we're an older group by numbers here. And I know that a lot of the people I'm preaching to this morning, your parents have already passed. So can I challenge you this? Even in your 60s, 70s, and 80s, there are people of authority and people of respect in your life. Could I say, even in your older age, you still have mother and father figures, people you look up to and admire and respect. But not just that, you have people looking up to you. So can I challenge you, live a life worth honoring? Live a life that makes it easy for your kids to honor you. I'm going to embarrass them, and I will apologize after church if I need to. And one of the things that stood out to me last year, my first year of pastoring, doing your dad's funeral. And as I didn't know the family very well, and even in cases where I dropped the ball and had to make some things right with the family, I sat there in that funeral home in the corner of an office, and I listened to story after story as kids honored their dad. And then I've watched, in the months since then, where Miss Mardell hasn't had to come to too many services alone on Sunday mornings. A lot of the time she's had her son here. Other times she's had a daughter here with her. And you know what? He lives in Chicago. The daughter of the grandsons that came not too long ago, I always get it mixed up. Are they in Idaho or Iowa? Idaho. Here's what I'm saying. One of my strongest moments from in my year of pastoring has been watching this family. But just watching how this family has honored a parent in death, and then also honored a parent in life. And it's convicted me for how I treat my mom and what I've done for my mom. But also, as I see things happen and as I see kids disrespecting their parents, or even parents neglecting their kids, it's challenged me more. I don't care if you don't get along with your parent. I don't care if your parent gets on your nerve. I don't care if things they do you don't agree with. Honor them. You know what, Valerie and I, we talk about some of the stuff that bothers us. We talk about some of the things that we don't agree with, not in a disrespectful way, but just talking things out. But we don't dishonor our parents. And if we do, we get it right. Why? Well, because the Bible says, and it's very clear. Honor your parents. Honor your mother. God will be with you. Some of you need to come up here and spend some time in prayer thanking God for the parents that He gave you. Some of you need to come up here and get right with God for treating your parents the way you have. Can I encourage you? Get right with the Lord. And get on the phone. Go face to face. Maybe you got to go to a cemetery. And say, God, or say, Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't honor you like I should have. Dad, Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said these things. I shouldn't have acted like this. I shouldn't have done this. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. You want to know why I started talking to my dad again? I didn't want the next time I saw my dad for it to be in a casket. And for me to have all these pent-up emotions and feelings that I would never get to tell him because I wouldn't talk to him, and now it's too late. And I would be sitting there staring at a casket going, Dad, I'm sorry. And I get it, some of you, that's what you're facing, that's what you have to do, and I'm sorry you have to, but do it. But some of you, your parents are still alive. It'd be a shame for you to have to get right at a casket when you could get right in person. Live a life worth honoring. But kids, honor your parents. Period. Father, thank you for my mom. I thank you for my dad. I thank you for the parents represented here. God, I pray that you would just speak to our hearts and we would respond appropriately.